Mask on, mask off. Very Eastern transcendental in orientation, don't you think? Today, Blake Morant, a black fellow, is the dean of the George Washington University School of Law. But back in the fall of 1997, both he and I were both departing active duty service in the U.S. Army. And upon a chance occasion, we both met each other at the Washington and Lee University School of Law, down in the Shenandoah Valley, where Virginia Governor Ralph Northam had graduated from the state college next door, VMI, years ago. When I had departed active duty as only a lieutenant, I was departing a position as the operations officer for U.S. Army Strategic Counterintelligence in the continental United States, while Blake was departing the Army as a captain, having served in the Army JAG Corps, and was looking to spread his little wings in the private sector as a law professor of administrative law, teaching first-year law students all about what was probably the last topic anyone attending a Tier 1 law school was interested in. Because when you attend a top law school, probably the last thing that you want in your life after being chosen as one of the most intelligent students and the best and spending thousands of dollars for your education, to become, upon graduation, a mere civil servant working as a government bureaucrat or defending government bureaucrats, expecting very little financial reward in return or fame. But in retrospection, almost a quarter century later, the chance encounter for a term with Blake takes on providential proportions in your pandemic crisis. One of the things that Blake used to tell students drawn to a top law school by dreams of becoming managing partners in large law firms on Wall Street and making more money than they could ever imagine, and who would not even consider a career in administrative law by following a prior example of Blake becoming a JAG officer in the military, was that whenever you get an administrative law case, what you wanted to do was stroll into court confidently with your client and saying the magic words, due process. And we know from the previous installment exactly what that means, surely, at least in the mind of an attorney, or to be more exact, a litigator, of which there are even fewer. And for review, due process is what? Due process is that process that is due. That's clear as mud. And when it comes to a legal matter in civil or criminal law, that means that is your constitutional guarantee to a day in court. May not actually be a full day, maybe about 5 minutes, but you're in court, which is not in the preamble. Don't look for it in the preamble. Stop, idiot. Because you don't want to make the mistakes of Henning Jacobson telling the Supreme Court about his derogations, albeit a very impressive word, but citing to the wrong damn source of law and just embarrassing his mama. And you don't want to embarrass your mama, especially in court. She'll be up crying. My little boy's going to jail. But as we have alluded in previous installments, can be very good in criminal case sometimes. In our case, crying mama defense. Gotta love it. Let's just say that a funny thing happened on the way to the forum, for now, which presents the gravamen of the argument for our case brought on appeal of writ of error to the Supreme Court, the nation's highest tribunal. But for now, just like Henning Jacobson's $5 fine and a smallpox vaccine, let's look at the genesis or origins of this, our facial coverings case that made it all the way to the United States Supreme Court to understand the procedural history that we do in law school, and perhaps shed some light on exactly why it is the only one to be so distinguished by reaching the pinnacle of achievement at the United States Supreme Court. And Blake also taught his students something else to do after walking into court and screaming due process, which already must sound like a captivating career. Oh, what do you do for a living? I walk into court and scream due process. Just tell them your attorney, impress them with your credentials, and don't bother to discuss exactly what it is you do as an attorney, or no one would ever say they wanted to become a lawyer. But before we delve into more of what students were taught in Blake's very first teaching job after departing the active duty Army, where soldiers are now being mandated to get vaccinated, let's develop further this notion of walking into a courtroom and screaming, due process! According to a recent poll conducted by ABC News and the Washington Post, about 30% of American workers not self-employed, like soldiers and sailors in the Army, and maybe military services that both Blake and I had departed years ago, remain unvaccinated. The non-compliant. The numbers in the military are actually much smaller, and where This is where only 14%, as of September 1st, remain unvaccinated, holding the line. And of those, only 16% say they would just roll over in the American public, go along just to keep their jobs. 16% going to roll over. 30% say, whoa. So we can assume that only about 7% of the active duty soldiers in the military yet work every day in the hard work of freedom, defending your freedoms, will continue to fight on, while the rest will surrender like the overwhelming minority. Imagine how we could have had that terrible thing in Afghanistan. We may want to reconsider our foreign policy options on force projection and bringing freedom around the world if everyone's going to surrender every time somebody opposes them. However, amongst those non-compliant civilians, 35% say that they would seek an exemption, which, as we have previously discussed, must be developed quite a bit more than that vague notion of rights that may be the way that it went in your head, and which makes you have to think, are there actually 35% in that remaining crowd who can qualify for medical or religious exemption, religiously applied from a sincerely held faith belief? Remember, you closed your church for a year. What kind of religion do you have? And even the Apostle Paul had said that the good that he would, he didn't. And he's got books published in the Bible. Come on. So, like we are the only ones at the United States Supreme Court on the facial coverings, this does not look like a success story for you and your sheriff's truck. And remember, this is a survey question and not real life. But according to ABC News, you're probably going to crack under pressure. ABC News and Washington Post, 42%, or a little less than half of the unvaccinated, say they would just tell their boss, you can take this job and shove it. Recall that despite the fact that everyone these days is talking about a lot of duty nonsense, over 75% of the age-eligible Americans between the ages of 17 and 34 are even qualified to join the military. And of those remaining, less than 1% are actually so inclined to do so. That's just so inclined, not sign the contract, just so inclined. When you are, I said I was going to do it, but I had asthma. Well, you already had. When you are just talking about principles, everyone can say they have conviction, but with a little evolutionary pressure, shall we say. God, I love coercive interrogation. A little evolutionary pressure, like losing your damn job, starving, going on welfare. That Shakespeare's vacillating Prince Hamlet said, death doth make cowards of us all. Such football at number 4, an in-progress review to see how many folded like a cheap suit sometime next year, shall we? But back to due process and the facial coverings, which technically are not masks, which is the nomenclature that clinicians and experts use for medical grade protection that is reserved for essential workers, which you obviously are not. Not only does a God in heaven not like you, your own government doesn't like you, fool. Regardless of your inflated feelings of self-importance, imbued with feelings of efficacy and empowerment by virtue of your non-medical grade mask, and at least in your mind provides you with an extra layer of protection. Wear 2 masks, wear 3 masks. However, if you are a student at the Antonin Scalia School of Law at George Mason University, you should know that Justice Scalia was what we describe not just as a conservative, but also a constitutional literalist, like the creationists who literally believe everything that is recorded in the book of Genesis, but in the legal profession. Imagine that. And so, as a constitutional literalist, we are compelled to return to that source of law to understand these vague notions. That source of law that even Justice Harlan was pointing Jacobson to. Imagine that. And we must know that these vague notions of derogated rights are not found in the preamble, and most times when we say the due process clause, hint, hint, due process, we link it with the Equal Protections Clause, all of which are contained in the 14th Amendment, passed after the Civil War, which states, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. Or I could have just said thereof. So you lost your liberty when the state compelled you to wear a non-medical grade facial covering that in your mind you may still believe is a mask, validated for effectiveness with the same confidence that you feel you have been provided an extra level of protection with your breakthrough infection-prone vaccine that has only been tested for efficacy and even upon full approval by the FDA is not based on an approved study, but only a preprint. Preprint! Oh my God. Waiting for final review. The vaccines were approved before the study was. So very quickly, as we are running quickly out of time, the dispositive question, wonderful word dealing in law school, kind of like deprecation of rights. The dispositive question is, under the Constitution, whether or not when your liberties were deprived or derogated, to use the Jacobson word, were you afforded what? Ask Blake Demorant at George Washington University School of Law. Go over there right now, call them up, send them an email. Due process, due process, due process. And what is due process? That process that is due. And next time we shall develop a little further this vague notion of liberties that may have been deprived or derogated within application of this jurisprudential notion, quite heady stuff, of due process and perhaps even equal protection of law. Live long and perspire, Star Wars Voyagers. This briefing is unclassified, as you will. My name is Major Mike Webb, and by God, I am running for Arlington Public School Board. Let's keep Mike Webb away from our school. Honest, carry on. This advertisement was authorized by Mike Webb.
I used to be a Power Ranger in a former life.
Thunk, I could have had a vaccine.